I never thought folding laundry would be the last normal thing I did in my own home. I had just smoothed out the collar of Mark's old work shirt, the one I still washed even though he hadn't worn it in months, when he stood over me and said it like it was a favor. "Pack your bags, Ma. You're going to a nursing home next week." Just like that. No preamble, no softening. He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. And worst of all, he looked proud. "It's better this way," he added. "You can't live alone at your age." I looked past him toward the hallway. My bedroom door was cracked open. Boxes. My boxes were stacked just inside, labeled in his handwriting: kitchen, closet, bathroom.
Ma.
I saw the clipboard sticking out of his leather bag on the counter. Bold black letters stared back at me. Property transfer agreement. My address in full beneath it. The room blurred for a second. I thought it was my vision, but then I realized it was my breath. Shallow, tight. "Mark," I said slowly. "Where did you get that paperwork?" He shrugged like we were talking about groceries. "Does it matter? I handled it." He turned his back to me, walked into the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of juice, as if he hadn't just shattered 38 years of motherhood with one sentence. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask him who the hell he'd become. But I knew, deep down, I knew this wasn't sudden. This was practiced. He'd been preparing, positioning, quietly, stripping me of rights I didn't even know were up for grabs. "Don't worry," he said over his shoulder. "The place is nice. They've got bingo in a TV room. You'll have company." Company? Like I was a toddler who needed playdates. I looked at the living room. My living room. The one I painted after his father died. The one with the chair where I nursed my hip back to health. The Afghan I crocheted while he slept on my couch between jobs. The room that had cradled me through grief and aging and motherhood. And I saw it in that moment for what it had become, a showroom. He'd already decided I didn't belong in it. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I stood slowly, one hand on the back of the couch to steady myself. I was still holding that shirt. His shirt. "I won't be going," I said quietly.
He scoffed.
"You already did. You just didn't know it." And he was right. I hadn't known. But I knew now. And I would find out just how deep his betrayal went. Because whatever documents he had, he forgot one thing. I never signed a damn thing. And that house, it still had my name on it. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay in bed with the lights off, staring at the ceiling fan, turning slow, like it had time to mock me. The house creaked like it always did. Old wood, familiar pipes, but it felt different now, like it was holding its breath. I kept thinking about those boxes. He packed them before he even told me, as if my say didn't matter. As if I was already gone. Around 1:40 a.m., I heard his voice. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was just awake, still sitting up in bed with my knees hugged to my chest like a child. He was in the kitchen on the phone. The way his voice dropped low told me everything. "She doesn't even know yet. It's a clean deal. Cash offer, no inspections. I just got to get her out first." I sat up straighter, heart thudding.
"She's dead."
"Wait," he said, like he was talking about some junk left in a garage. "I can't keep babysitting her, man. She's old. This house is wasted on her. Dead weight." The words settled on my skin like frost. He used to bring me hot tea when I had the flu. I once stayed up 37 hours straight in an ICU waiting room when he got in that car accident in college. He'd cried in my arms after his divorce, clutched my shoulders like I was the only anchor left in the world. Now I was dead weight. I slipped out of bed and padded to my dresser. Quiet, careful. The floor creaked in that one spot near the vent, but I knew how to step over it. I opened the top drawer and reached underneath the old photo albums and prayer cards. The deed copy was gone. I checked again, pulled out every old receipt, every birthday card, every tucked-away insurance statement. Nothing. I kept the original in a fireproof box at the bank, but I'd had a copy here just in case. I'd shown it to him once when we updated the property tax info. He knew where it was, and now it was gone. My hands started shaking. I wasn't just being moved. I was being erased, and he thought I'd let him do it. I closed the drawer slowly and sat back on the edge of the bed. My mouth was dry. My chest felt like it had shrunk 2 sizes. I stared at the shadow of my own hand on the floor and wondered how a child I raised could turn into someone who saw me as a barrier instead of a mother. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because I realized something more important. He wasn't afraid of me. He thought I had no fight left. And that's exactly why I was going to win. The next morning, I walked out to the backyard. Not because I wanted to water anything. I just needed to breathe where the air still remembered who I was. The hose was still coiled near the porch. The dirt beneath the rose bushes had hardened since last week when I last knelt there, weeding around their roots. I planted every one of those rose bushes myself with my bare hands. The first one went in the spring after his father died. It was red. Mark picked it out with me at the nursery. He said red was strong. He was 12. Now he calls me dead weight. I stood there staring at the faded gardening gloves left on the bench. The ones I used even last summer, kneeling in the dirt with aching knees and brittle bones. Because this house was mine, my peace. My last corner of the world where I still mattered. His father left it to me in his will. I remember holding that document in my hands after the funeral, clutching it like a lifeline. We had no savings, barely any insurance, just this house, a worn-down 2-bedroom with bad gutters and cracked tile, but it was ours. He left it to me because he knew. He knew I'd fight to keep Mark stable, grounded, and I did. God, I did. I took double shifts at the diner. I packed lunches with off-brand peanut butter and wrote little notes inside. You got this. Proud of you. I patched holes in his jeans and told him college was still possible. I sold my mother's jewelry to pay for his textbooks.
He was my only child, my one job.
I sacrificed everything for him after his father died. Not because I expected payback, but because that's what love is. You give it over and over, even when it drains you. But now he looked me in the face and planned to dump me in a nursing home like expired furniture. I couldn't even hate him for it. Not yet. Because I still didn't understand how he got there. How that little boy who cried when he saw me cry had turned into a man who could throw me out of my own life. I touched the rose bush nearest the porch. The tag still hung from the stem. Peace, it said, a soft yellow bloom just starting to open. The irony almost made me laugh, but it wasn't funny because this wasn't just about real estate. This was about erasure. He wanted the house.
Yes.
But more than that, he wanted to be free of the weight of who I was. The woman who remembered too much, who took up space, who still had roots here. I knelt slowly, knees stiff, fingers in the dirt. I dug just a little just to feel something solid. I whispered to no one but the weeds and the worms, "You think I won't fight because I'm quiet, but quiet doesn't mean I'm done." I wasn't going to plead for dignity. I was going to reclaim it inch by inch, document by document, because this house, these roses, they weren't just planted. They were earned. 2 days later, I sat across from Nora at the local diner, my coffee trembling in its cup. We'd been friends since high school, back when I still believed a good heart was all you needed to be safe in this world. Nora had married young, worked at the county title office for 31 years, and retired with a pension and a sharp memory. She always had the kind of laugh that could cut through a funeral. But today, her face was still focused. I hadn't told her everything over the phone, just asked to meet. I said I needed to understand how a house could be sold without the owner ever knowing. Now she stirred her tea once, twice, and said slowly, "Not legally, not unless someone forged something." The word hit me like a crack in the spine. I looked around the diner instinctively, like the truth might echo too loudly if I didn't watch it. A couple booths were occupied. Old men nursing pancakes. 2 teenagers on their phones. No one looking. No one listening. I leaned in. What kind of documents would they need to fake? She listed them quietly. A deed transfer, notarized signature verification, maybe a power of attorney if they wanted to sneak it through quietly. My stomach turned. "I never gave him power of attorney," I whispered. "Then he had no right." She set her spoon down. "None." I blinked hard, forcing back the burn behind my eyes. "I checked my drawer the night," he told me. The deed copies were gone. Nora's lips pressed together. "That's not a coincidence." I shook my head. He had papers. I saw the title page. He was walking around with my address in his bag like it belonged to him. She nodded slowly. It's not hard for someone to make it look official, especially if the notary is a friend or if they forged the signature. But what if I still have proof?
I asked.
A scanned will, tax records, old statements. Her expression changed, sharpened. Then you've got a case. I sat back in the booth, the vinyl seat sticky against my arms. I suddenly felt every year I'd lived in my bones. But I also felt something else. I felt my spine return to me. Nora, I said slowly, do you know a good lawyer? She smiled just a little. Not a laugh. Not even warmth, just a flicker of quiet respect. I know one who hates fraud and loves paperwork. I nodded because this wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. And I was done sitting still while someone stole the life I built out of grief and grit and garden soil. Let him smirk now. Let him count invisible checks and box up my linens. I was about to show him that even a quiet mother can become a storm, especially when the law is on her side. I hadn't stepped foot inside the public library in almost a year. But the moment I walked in, it felt like returning to a version of myself I hadn't visited in a long time. The quiet hum of old computers, the scent of worn pages, a few heads looked up, half recognition, half curiosity. I kept my head down and made my way to the back row of public terminals. I didn't come here for comfort. I came to dig. I logged in with shaking hands. Pulled up the tax assessor's site first just to see property records. Parcel search. I typed in my address. There it was. My name still listed. No transfer on file yet. My breath caught. Half relief. Half panic. He hadn't finished it, but he was close. I opened my email next, searched for will deed, scanned copy. There, buried in a folder I hadn't touched in years, was the PDF I needed, my husband's will, the final version, signed, witnessed, sealed. I remembered the day we signed it, how he coughed through every sentence, but still smiled as he slid the papers across the table to me. You keep the house, he said. No matter what, you built this life. You finish it your way. I pulled the document up on screen. There it was, clear as day, my name, sole inheritor, full ownership of the property.
No son.
No co-ownership, just me. I downloaded a copy to a thumb drive I carried in my purse. Old habit. I didn't trust clouds. Then I went a step further. I opened the county website again and looked up not just the tax records, but recent deed activity. There was nothing on file yet, but I knew it was coming. He'd already boxed my life away, already bragged about the walkthrough. That meant he thought he'd sealed the deal. But unless he'd forced something through, unless a notary had signed something they shouldn't have, he was bluffing on stolen chips. I leaned back, staring at the screen. For the first time in days, I felt grounded, like the floor was under me again, like I could feel the weight of my name holding strong against the paper he thought he could rewrite. If he sold it, he forged something big. And if that was true, I wasn't just a mother reclaiming her house. I was a witness, a victim, a plaintiff. And my silence was no longer protection. It was evidence. Later, I was already in a lawyer's office. My friend recommended Mr. Holtz's office, which smelled like old files and stronger coffee. The kind of place where truth didn't need to shout. It just needed signatures and proof. He was in his late 50s, glasses low on his nose, a navy tie with coffee stains he didn't bother hiding. I liked him instantly. I handed him the USB drive and my printed copy of the will. He barely spoke while he reviewed, just nodded, flipped, highlighted. Then he asked the question that split my stomach open like a bad secret. Have you ever signed over power of attorney to your son? I looked at him, heart in my throat.
No.
His eyes stayed on the page, but I saw something change. His jaw tensed slightly. His fingers stopped moving. Are you absolutely sure? I'd remember that, I said. I've signed a lot of things in my life. Field trip forms, mortgages, surgery releases, but never that, not once. He gave a small nod. Then we need to act fast, he explained in slow, careful language, the kind they use when they know the truth will hurt more than help. If he filed a forged deed or submitted false documents to initiate a transfer and there's no power of attorney, that's fraud, real estate fraud, felony level. If we're talking about property this valuable, I swallowed hard. What do? He opened a folder. First, we request a certified copy of the most recent deed from the county clerk. Then, we file a fraud alert and a notice of rescission. I nodded. My palms were damp, my spine straight. What does that do? It freezes everything, he said. Anyone trying to sell or transfer that house now has to answer to a legal challenge. It puts everything under scrutiny. And if he forged something, that'll come out fast. I exhaled slowly. My hands were steady now, not shaking like they had been in the library, not burning like they had in the garden. Just steady. He kept speaking, timelines, procedures, statements. But all I heard was this. I had time. I had truth. And I had someone finally listening. Not to dismiss me. Not to pat me on the head and call it family drama, but to defend me. I looked at the folder in front of me. My name on it, my house, my fight. For the first time since Mark stood in that living room with a clipboard and betrayal in his eyes, I knew I wasn't alone. I'd raised him better than this, but I couldn't fix what he'd broken. What I could do was hold the line he never thought I'd dare draw, and make damn sure this time he couldn't cross it. The next thing we did was go straight to the county clerk's office to see what Mark had done behind my back. Fluorescent lights, a line of chairs no one sat in, and that particular silence only found in buildings where too many lies have passed through paper. I gave the clerk my ID and the property address. She didn't ask questions, just typed, printed, and handed over a manila envelope with my name on it. Inside was the updated deed. I took one look, and my stomach turned to lead. There it was, my house but not my name. Grantee, Mark Travis Ellison. Transfer date, 17 days ago. Witnessed by notary Laurel Dent. My fingers clenched so tight the page started to bend. I knew that name. Laurel was Mark's ex-girlfriend. They'd split over a year ago, but she'd always wanted to be helpful. The kind of woman who called herself professional because she wore too much perfume and owned a clipboard. I stared at her signature, bold and curvy. It didn't match the ones I'd seen before. Not even close. The stamp looked real, but the date bled off the edge as if someone rushed it through a home printer. My lawyer, Mr. Holtz, took one look and shook his head. That's a bad forgery.
I knew it, I said.
He thought I wouldn't check. Holtz didn't hesitate. He filed a notice of fraudulent conveyance right then and there. Stamped, sealed, sent to the records division. He attached a signed affidavit with my will, the scanned deed, and a sworn statement confirming I had never authorized any transfer. Then he filed the notice of rescission. It was like drawing a red circle around the crime. From that moment forward, no title company, buyer, or agent could touch that house without seeing the warning. He's not going to like this, I said softly. He doesn't have to, Holtz replied. We're not asking for permission. We're correcting a crime. I left the office with those papers clutched tight in my bag. They weighed nothing and everything. My breath shook as I stepped out into the summer heat. The sun was hot, but I didn't wipe the sweat from my neck. I let it stay. I wanted to feel the sting because it reminded me I was still here, still fighting. And Mark, he was about to learn the truth. You can lie on paper, but you can't outrun ink. That night, Mark came home whistling, like a man walking toward victory, like someone who thought the ground beneath him belonged to him. He tossed his keys on the kitchen counter, opened the fridge, cracked a soda. The fizz broke the silence like it had something to celebrate. I stayed seated at the table, folding a dish towel like it might hold my fury together. Then he said it. They're coming for a walkthrough on Tuesday, he said, casual as ever, like he was telling me the cable guy was swinging by. Just act normal. You don't need to be here anyway. I blinked. Who's coming? The buyers. Young couple. Love the backyard. She wants to turn it into a yoga studio or some sh*T, he said. The roses are charming. He grinned like a child who'd stolen cookies from the jar and thought no one noticed the crumbs. He looked right at me and raised his soda like a toast. This place is finally going to give me a real break. A break? I smiled, a tight, dangerous little smile. Well, that's nice. He didn't see the twitch in my jaw, the calm in my voice that didn't match the weight in the room because he didn't know. He had no idea the fraud alert was already on file. No idea that every document he'd submitted was now a glowing red flag in the county system. No idea that the so-called sale would collapse the second anyone did a real title search. He walked away whistling again, and I kept folding that towel. It was strange, watching him swagger around the kitchen I built, sipping soda from the same fridge I scrimped to replace, wiping his mouth with the dishcloth I'd stitched my initials into. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd boxed me up, papered me over, filed me away. But what he didn't know was that I was already 2 steps ahead, and the law was catching up to his lies. I stared down at the soft blue towel in my hands, initials stitched in red thread. R. Ellison, still here, still mine. Let him play king for 3 more days. Tuesday would come. And with it, the end of his fantasy. Over the next few days, I did what I always did. I made dinner. I refilled the bird feeder. I sat beside him on the couch while he watched sports like nothing had shifted, like he hadn't gutted me and called it a favor. But everything had shifted because this time I wasn't just surviving, I was watching, documenting. I found the old voice recorder Cliff gave me years ago. He said it was for writing recipes. I'd tucked it in the junk drawer and forgotten it. I slipped new batteries in, hit record, and set it on the shelf behind the lamp in the living room. Every time Mark spoke, I listened differently now. His bragging, his entitlement, his little slip-ups. Once she's out, I'll clear 10 grand easy. They'll never check as long as it looks clean on paper. I didn't flinch. I didn't interrupt. I stirred soup and nodded. Let him keep digging. And I saved every file. Meanwhile, Mr. Holtz had sent copies of the fraudulent deed, my will, and the notary discrepancy to the state's fraud division. He said it was strong enough to open an investigation, especially with the forged stamp and the fact that Mark had no power of attorney on record. We'll let them decide, he said. But the odds are shifting. And they were. I could feel it. Even the walls seemed to know I wasn't just a burden anymore. I was a witness, a plaintiff, a woman who had finally decided to stop shrinking in her own home. Mark was too busy patting himself on the back to notice. He was already planning what to do with his cut. Maybe Bice, he said one night, feet up on the coffee table. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I don't have to babysit anymore. I stirred my tea and looked at him over the rim of my mug. Sounds like a dream, I said. He smirked. Damn right it does. Let him dream. Let him imagine balconies and offshore accounts. Because while he fantasized about freedom, I was laying the trap. Not with revenge, not with rage, but with facts, with timestamps, with truth. I was finally rebuilding something solid. Not just a legal defense, but hope. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed without checking the locks 3 times. Mr. Holtz called me 2 days later. His voice was calm, but I could hear it. The shift, the weight behind his words. They flagged the case, he said. The forged deed, the notary's signature, your recordings. It's all under formal review now. And if he pushes the sale, he's looking at felony charges. I sat on the bench outside the post office when he said it. I had my coat buttoned all the way up, though the day was too warm for it. Maybe I just needed something wrapped around me, something tight, something real. What happens next? I asked. Holtz didn't pause. We wait. Let the authorities handle the investigation. You've already done your part. And frankly, you've done it better than most.
I didn't know what to say.
I'd been holding tension in my jaw for so long. It felt strange to let it go. You caught him mid-crime, he said. If he moves forward with this walkthrough on Tuesday, he won't just lose the sale. He might lose his freedom. I thought about that, about Mark in handcuffs. About the boy who once ran home crying because someone stepped on his science project, now possibly staring down felony theft. I didn't feel triumphant. Not really. I just felt done. Holtz's voice softened. Rose, he said. I've worked 100 cases like this. Most people don't fight. They're too scared or too tired. But you didn't flinch. I closed my eyes. I was scared.
I said.
Still am. Good, he said. Means you're human. But scared or not, you stood up. He let a breath hang between us. Let's wait for them to come knocking. I hung up and sat on that bench a little longer, watched the cars roll by. Watched a woman my age walk out of the pharmacy, holding her husband's hand like it was the only steady thing left in her life. I looked down at mine, shaky, weathered, but still here. I had spent decades letting people think my silence meant agreement, letting Mark assume that kindness meant weakness. But now I was no longer waiting for a miracle. I was waiting for justice. And it had my address. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was coming down the stairs, slow and careful, holding the banister with one hand and my phone in the other. Mark passed me halfway up, fresh from the gym, earbuds in, towels slung over his shoulder like he was training for a future he hadn't earned. He didn't even glance at me until I reached the landing. Then, right as he brushed past, he muttered under his breath, low enough to sting. "Enjoy the view while you still can." That's all he said. No smile, no pause, just cruelty wrapped in confidence. I froze. Not because I was scared. That part had burned away weeks ago. I froze because in that moment, I understood something that I'd been trying to avoid. He didn't love me. He didn't even see me. He saw what I owned. And once he believed he could take it, I stopped mattering. All those years holding his hand in court when his ex-wife took custody, scraping together money for that damn vocational school he dropped out of, defending him to relatives who saw right through him. I thought it was love. It wasn't. It was proximity, usefulness. And the second I outlived that, he moved on. I walked into the bathroom and shut the door gently. I sat on the toilet lid, staring at the grout line near the tub that I had patched myself 5 years ago with a butter knife and patience. My throat felt thick, but no tears came. He had looked right through me, like the wall, like the floor, like furniture. And maybe that was the moment, not when he forged the deed, not when he called me dead weight, not even when he boxed up my life, but this moment when he walked past me without a flicker of guilt and laid claim to a life he didn't build. That was when I stopped loving him the way a mother does. I didn't hate him. I just stopped covering for him. Stopped remembering the child he was instead of the man he chose to be. That afternoon, I went to the bank. I wore my church blouse, the one with the pearl buttons that always reminded me who I was before I let people talk over me. Nora drove me.
She didn't ask why.
She just handed me a butterscotch candy at the red light and said, "Take your time." Inside the branch, I asked for a private appointment. The woman led me into a glass office and smiled like she expected a small withdrawal or a lost password. I handed her a notarized letter instead. New accounts, new beneficiaries, new trust. "I'd like to move all assets into an irrevocable trust," I said. "Effective immediately, my name only. No shared access, no verbal authorizations allowed." She blinked, looked at the documents, then at me. "Is everything all right?" I smiled. "Everything's finally starting to be." It took 2 hours, but when I left, every cent I had, from the savings Cliff left me to the pension checks Mark used to manage, was sealed away behind a trust with only one key, mine. Nora waited patiently. We stopped for pie afterward. I didn't eat much. My stomach was still too tight. But the waitress called me ma'am and brought the check straight to me. And for once, I didn't hesitate to reach for it. That evening, I told Mark the garage door was broken. I said the keypad must have shorted out. He barely looked up from his phone.
"Call someone," he said.
I already had. And when the locksmith came, I stood beside him while he changed every last lock. Front door, back door, garage, basement. I tipped him extra to do it quietly. Mark was out. I had an hour. It was enough. The last thing I did before he returned was slide a copy of the new trust paperwork into my nightstand drawer right under my rosary beads. When he walked back in, the lights were on. The kitchen smelled like stew. He didn't ask about the locks. He didn't notice the quiet shift in the air, but I did. He was standing in my house on borrowed time. I watched him open the fridge, drink straight from a carton. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and tossed me a look. "What?" he said. I smiled. "Nothing." Because sometimes the loudest thing a woman can say is nothing at all. And that silence, it's the sound of power coming home. A couple of days later, a black car pulled into the driveway. I was trimming dead leaves off the porch planter, wearing my old gardening gloves, the ones with the frayed fingertips, when it rolled to a stop. Windows tinted, state plates, doors that didn't creak when they opened. Two men stepped out. One wore a badge clipped to his belt. The other carried a folder. They asked for Mark. My spine didn't stiffen. I didn't smile. I just nodded toward the house and said, "He's inside." They thanked me. Calm, polite, practiced. This wasn't their first fraud case, but it was his. I stood on the porch and watched the screen door swing open. Mark stepped out barefoot, holding a bowl of cereal, spoon still in his mouth. The second he saw them, the color drained from his face. "What's this about?" he asked, voice rising too fast. Mr. Ellison, the man with the folder, said, "We're here regarding a real estate transaction filed on May 12th. There are concerns about forged documentation, including a notary's seal and signature." Mark blinked, swallowed, looked at me, and that's when it happened. The spoon dropped into the bowl. Milk splashed down his shirt. His jaw moved, but no sound came out. "You're under investigation," the officer added, "for attempted fraudulent conveyance of residential property." Mark finally found his voice, shaky and thin. He turned to me. "What did you do, Ma?" I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just peeled off my gloves, one finger at a time, and laid them neatly on the porch rail. "You did this to yourself," I said. "You're lying," he shouted. "You think this changes anything? You think you won?" His voice cracked like a boy's, like it did when he was 7 and broke a neighbor's window and cried in the kitchen, swearing it wasn't his fault. But this wasn't a window. This was my life. I stepped down onto the sidewalk, slow and steady. For once, I was taller than him. Not in inches, but in presence. "In truth, you forged my name," I said quietly. "You filed fake papers. You tried to throw me away for money. You were just sitting on it," he screamed. "I needed it more than you." And there it was. The truth behind every lie. I nodded. "Just once." "Well," I said, stepping back toward the porch. "Now you have nothing." The officer asked him to come inside to answer a few questions. He followed, still sputtering, still pointing fingers in every direction but his own. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything I needed to say. And this time, there was no box big enough for him to hide the truth in. They questioned him right there, in the living room. The same room where he once sat with his feet on my coffee table, laughing at me like I was senile, like I wouldn't notice. He was hollowing out my life from the inside. This time, he didn't laugh. His voice cracked as he answered their questions, stumbling over dates, fumbling through paperwork he hadn't expected to be examined by anyone but his own greed. I stood near the entryway, not eavesdropping, witnessing. "You were just sitting on it," he shouted again, this time louder, like volume could turn theft into logic. "She didn't need it. What's the point of leaving a house to rot under some old woman who barely leaves the porch?" My jaw locked. My fingers curled at my sides. The younger investigator asked calmly, "Did your mother sign the deed transfer in your presence?" Mark hesitated. "She was going to. I mean, she knew." The officer held up a hand. "That's not what I asked." I stepped forward then, slow and measured. I looked at Mark, really looked, and saw what was left. A man who thought he could cash in on love and skipped the invoice. A man who mistook silence for permission. "You forged my name," I said. "You made calls behind my back. You stuffed my life into cardboard boxes and told yourself I was lucky to be breathing. You're twisting it," he snapped. "I was helping you. You can't take care of a house like this anymore." "You didn't offer to help," I said. "You offered me an eviction," with a smile. The room went quiet. Even the officers stopped moving. Mark stepped forward like he was going to say something else. Maybe lie, maybe beg. But I didn't give him the chance. "I trusted you," I said, my voice low and even. "I gave you everything I had. When your father died, I held this place together with duct tape and prayers so you could grow up without knowing how close we were to losing it all. I ate toast for dinner so you could get your stupid tech certificate. And this is what you did with that trust. His face flushed red, then pale, then something in between. Shame and defiance played tug-of-war in his throat. The older officer nodded toward me. Ma'am, would you mind stepping into the kitchen while we finish here? I smiled politely. Of course, but I looked Mark in the eyes before I left the room. And I said it plain. You thought this house was the prize. You forgot the woman who built it. He didn't answer because there was nothing left to say. 2 hours later, I sat in the lobby of the police station, staring at the vending machine like I might recognize something inside it. I wasn't there to press charges. Not yet. I was there to deliver. The officers had asked me to bring any supporting materials, recordings, documents, physical evidence of the forgery. Mr. Holtz had prepped a folder the size of a college textbook. I carried it in a cloth grocery bag, the same one Mark used to stuff with cereal boxes when we couldn't afford name brand. Funny. What becomes sacred? I handed it over to the desk sergeant. Copies of the fraudulent deed, notarized affidavit, screenshots of Mark's texts bragging about clearing out the old lady, and the audio recordings. Give it all to the DA, I said. He lied on paper and dared me to notice. The sergeant nodded. It's more than enough. I took a seat and waited. I didn't know what for exactly. Closure maybe, or just to see him brought in under the same rules he thought didn't apply to him. A half-hour passed. Then a door opened down the hall. Mark came out with an officer at his side. Not cuffed, not yet. But his face said it all. His world had cracked, and he was still holding the hammer. He looked up, saw me, his jaw clenched. You really did it, he said, almost in awe. You actually turned me in. I didn't answer because I didn't need to explain justice to the man who betrayed it. But still he kept going. You could have talked to me. We could have worked it out. You didn't have to humiliate me. He looked at me like I was the villain, like I had stolen something from him. I stood up slowly, hands folded. I walked over, not to comfort him, but to meet him where he stood. Eye to eye. I gave you chances, I said. Too many. But you didn't want forgiveness. You wanted free rein. You're my mother, he hissed. You're supposed to protect me. I did, I whispered. Even when you didn't deserve it. I leaned in just enough for him to hear me clearly, but no one else. And now I'm protecting what's mine. He looked away first. That was new. The officer tapped his arm, gently guiding him down the corridor. Mark didn't fight, didn't scream, but he looked over his shoulder once at me, and that's when I realized he thought I'd never do it. He thought I'd go to my grave, quiet, broken, grateful for whatever scraps he tossed at my feet. But now he knew the truth. I wasn't his burden. I was his reckoning. 2 days later, I sat across from Mr. Holtz again. Same gray tie, same chipped mug on his desk. But this time the man was smiling. They're pressing charges, he said simply. Forgery, attempted real estate fraud, abuse of elder authority, and since you had no power of attorney on file, the case is airtight. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And the house? I asked, even though I already knew. He slid the paper across the desk. Restoration of property ownership granted to Mark Ellison. Fraudulent rescinded by court order filed under claim. Rose Ellison. I traced my name with my fingertip. Not trembling. Not dazed. Grounded. This document restores full ownership to you, Holt said. Filed. Certified. Recorded. The last thread had been cut. No more pretending. No more waiting for someone else to protect me. I'd done it. I stood up slow and deliberate, and shook his hand. Thank you, I said. You earned this, he replied. Most people freeze when betrayal comes from family. You didn't. You moved. Mr. Holtz, I said quietly. He looked up. I turned around slower this time. Not uncertain, just full. Full of years, full of wounds, full of choices I never wanted to have to make. I don't want him in prison, I said. I want him gone. I want peace. I want my name back and my door safe. He set his pen down, waited. He needs to face consequences, I added. I'm not asking you to shield him. I exhaled. I just don't want to be the reason he sits in a cell. I want to be the reason he wakes up. Mr. Holtz nodded slowly. You'd be surprised how rare it is. What you're doing? What's that? Drawing a line without needing revenge. I shrugged. I'm too old for revenge. It rots you faster than grief. He opened a folder, pulled out a notepad. I can speak with the DA, he said. Request reduced sentencing in exchange for a protective order. Mandatory counseling, no contact, and if he violates that, then it's on him. I finished. He looked at me for a long second, not with pity, not even respect, just recognition. The kind of look you give someone who walked through fire and didn't let it make them cruel. I'll make the call, he said. I nodded. Thank you. As I stepped out into the hall, I realized I wasn't carrying the same weight anymore. Mark had tried to take everything. My name, my house, my peace, and I could have taken everything from him in return, but I didn't. I just wanted distance, safety, silence, not out of fear, but because I finally had the power to choose who got to speak into my life. And from now on, he wouldn't be one of them. The afternoon sun poured through the window just right, the way it used to when Cliff would nap in his recliner, and I'd sit beside him with a crossword. I had a fresh cup of tea in my hand, my favorite mug warmed through. The one Mark once called Old Lady Ugly. It was chipped on the handle now, still perfect. Nora sat across from me, ankles crossed, laughing softly over something she read in the paper. Look at us, she said. Two old birds with nothing to prove and everything to remember. I smiled. I looked out the window where the roses had started to bloom again. Bold, red, alive. They hadn't withered. Neither had I. I didn't lose my home, I said. I reclaimed my life. And that was the truth. The whole hard, holy truth. Because this house, it was never just a structure. It was a witness, a battlefield, a quiet kind of altar. And now it was my proof that quiet doesn't mean weak. That being used doesn't mean broken. And that when you finally say no loud enough, even to people who tried to erase you have to watch you rise.